Hey everyone,
It's loading.
I'm here to discuss one of the new decks in the OP2 English meta. In this video, I will be going over Kin'emon. This new leader gives us a different way to play green in the OP2 meta. With only having one or less characters on the field, once per turn, Kin'emon lets us play the next Wano country type character with a cost of 3 or more for Warden lets. This lets us play powerful green cards, turn potentially earlier, and can help establish a powerful board at the beginning and even late game. With that being said, let's jump into the build.
The core.
The first card is Beige Capone. Capone is a 1-drop blocker and is cheap and helps us save our life or important characters, so we run 4. Mononosuke was an available green card in OP1, but in OP2 with Kin'emon, he is not. He lets you search the top 5 for a Wano country type character and put it into your hand, so we run 4. Killer is possibly the best blocker in green, and then he draws you a card on block if you have 3 or more characters on the field. When you're discounting characters with Kin'emon, you'll most likely have 3 pretty early on, so helping you protect your life and important characters while also running a card, there's no reason to run any less than 4. Bonnie helps you grab the other half of your deck that Mononosuke doesn't. In OP1, she was much more impactful, but for OP2, she'll be less impactful and Mononosuke will be more impactful. But there's no reason to run less than 4 of her, because she still is a searcher and provides card advantage. Scratch Manapoo is a 2k counter and he's a supernova, so therefore he's searchable with Bonnie. He has another effect, I'm not sure what it is, but since he's a 2k counter and is searchable, we run 4. Izo is our other 2k counter character, and is searchable with Mononosuke. His effect lets you rest a character that costs 4 or less. This effect is much more better than Scratch Manapoo, and is searchable. 2k counter, no reason not to run 4. Kazuki Oden is a powerhouse, and this is the card that you're gonna see on the field to close out games. For just 3, you can unrest him, and he has 8,000 base power. So if you put more Dawn under him, it can go higher, and you're paying 3 to swing with a potentially 11, 12, or maybe even 15 twice is just huge for closing out games, killing big characters that are hard to deal with. And if that's not, just bonkers already, on KO, he lets you search your deck for a Wano country character that costs 3 or less and play it on the field. So likely you're grabbing Okiku, or it could be something else like an Izo to help rest the field and potentially stop another swing from getting in. For this reason, there's no reason not to run 3 to 4 Kazuki Odens in Kin'emon. The new Yamato may not have any counter power, but when she comes down, she rests a character that costs 6 or less, and for only 4 Dawn with 6k power, this card is super impactful and will definitely help you control the early board. For this reason, we run 4. Okiku did wonders in OP1 and still gonna do wonders in OP2. When having a Dawn attached to this character and attacking, it can rest a character on your opponent's side of the field that costs 5 or less. This will help you let you swing and then go on with another character, or play something like an X-Drake or a Killer to come down and kill that rested character. This card is also searchable with Mononosuke, and it can be grabbed by Kazuki Oden when he's KO'd. And for this reason, we run 4. That's the core of the deck, with a total number of 35 to 36 cards, depending, which gives us about 14 to 15 cards to play with, depending on your playstyle, what's popular in your locals, and when you play at bigger events. With that said, let's see some of the cards that can be ran in these spots that I like to call
Flex spots.
Nekomamushi helps us get further board control. Although we have cards like Yamato, Okiku, and Izo now, we might not run as many as we used to. But if you find that your locals is scattered with Zoros, you might want to consider running a few. Eustace Captain Kid, aka Big Kid, the boogeyman of OP1. This card is still seeing play in OP2, and why not? It's just a powerhouse. It makes the hitbox going from 5k to 8k to hit at your leader, and it can just provide so much board control. So if you're looking for a more control style build, you might want to consider Big Kid. Mid Kid has been doing wonders since the Super pre-release, and is not going anywhere. For only 7 costs, you can drop him down and he can be an aggressive swing and can be a blocker on your opponent's turn. Mini decks still play this card, and I will still play this card, depending on my meta, and just depending on how it evolves. OP1 Yamato can now be played a turn earlier with Kinemon's effect. Putting this card down and swinging at your opponent and denying them that card draw they see from life can really ruin a lot of card strategies. Rizo can now be played on turn 1 with Kinemon's effect. Getting this down with a Mononosuke or something like a Bajori Bonnie can help you get so much early card advantage. Much like X-Drake, Killer comes down on the board and KOs a character rested with cost of 3 or less. Now, most of the times you might want to be running X-Streak because they have 6k power and he kills something that costs 1 more. But if your meta is running rampant with Zoros and low-to-the-ground aggressive decks like Law, then you might want to consider Killer to help you in those earlier games when the aggression is higher. Trafalgar Law has one of the best effects in the game. By returning a character, you can play one that costs 3 or less back onto the field. This lets you balance searchers to play blockers and things like Okiku. You can also swing with an Okiku, bounce to hand, play it again, so it can't be swung over. Kazuki Toki becomes a blocker when you have an Odin character on the field. All Yamato cards say this is also treated as Odin, so if you have a Yamato on the field, this card also becomes a blocker. It can also help you protect your big guy like Odin and your Yamatos later on in the game, so it's a card to consider. Basil Hawkins can be great at attacking rested characters and coming down and just being a major threat on the board. Although some decks have an easy time dealing with this card, it's mainly used for other matchups, like red or green. This is definitely a card to consider if Locals is being ran over by green. Paradise Waterfall lets you give 2k defense just for 1 Dawn. It also lets you restand a character. This can help you use your blockers twice like Mid-Kid or even Law. It can also help you protect your Kazuki Odin when you might have a lower hand and you need to go in twice with a swing and then protect him on the next turn by unresting him. Punk Gibson gives you 4k counter power for only 2 Dawn, and it also rests a character that costs 4 or less. This can be huge to give you board control early on to deal with blockers or maybe a Rezo or something scary from the Zoro deck or just little things that you want to deal with. Can mostly be used as a removal card, but can also be used defensively later on in the game. Straw Sword can be used to remove bigger targets that you can't tap down from, say, your Yamatos or Okikus. I wouldn't run too many of this card though, so maybe a 1-0 or 2, depending if you're having a hard time dealing with certain decks and certain cards in your locals, like green or maybe Kaido.
Deck builds.
Those are the flexible cards in the deck. Now with these said, we can run about 14 to 15 because we don't want to change up our core. With that said, let's look at some of the builds that you could use for this deck.
Mid-range.
So the first build that we're going to be looking at is the mid-range build. The first flex spot goes to Kazuki Toki. She's a 1k blocker if you have a Kazuki Odin on the field, which Yamato counts herself as a Kazuki Odin. So you have a couple slots that this card will turn into a blocker. Also in the late game when we have Big Odin on the field, she helps us block and save him. And sometimes when we need to go in with Kazuki Odin and do multiple swings, we just get a little more protection with her. The next flex spot goes to Nekomamushi. This is a mid-range build. So early on in the game, we want to rest stuff, we want to swing at stuff, we want to make sure they don't use their card advantage cards like Nami's or something like that to get extra swings out of there. And it can even rest an Okiku, so it can be really good in the mirror match. The next flex spot is Raizo. Raizo's a great card. I would run more in a control build, and you'll see that later. But for this build, just running 2. You can play it a turn early now with Kinemon's effect, and having that advantage is nice. Having the card advantage with Raizo is really nice too, because he can swing, draw you a card if you have another rested character. He does also count himself as the 2 rested characters, so having him early, getting some early card advantage with this deck is nice. But we only run 2, not 4 since we are a mid-range build. The next spot goes to X-Drake. He's great tempo, he's great board control, comes down, kills something that costs 4 or less that's rested. He's also a 6k body, so he comes down, kills something, and also is a threat later. Perfect for a mid-range strategy. The next flex spot is Mid-Kid. He's a 7k blocker, comes down for a 7, and restands at the end of your turn. What a great card to go in on your opponent's board, opponent's life. You get an 8k swing just by activating his effect. It can also be a blocker on your opponent's turn to really help, if you really have to block out, or you can block smaller hits and keep them alive. The last flex spot goes to Paradise Waterfall. This can be used with Mid-Kid to get a 9k block and then another block out of him. It can also be used to restand your Kazuki Odin if you need to go in with Odin but you don't have enough counter power to save him. You might be able to save him once and then restand him, and then your opponent can't deal with him.
Control.
Now we have the control build for Kin'emon. The first flex spot is going to go to the 3-drop killer. This is really good for early game strategies. Honestly, you can share this spot with Ryzo, so you could run 3 of these, you could run 3 Izos. I put them at 2 for now to see how impactful Zoro's going to be in the game, but this card is really in here to counter Zoro and those low to the ground decks since it kills something that costs 3 or less. Control decks usually have a harder time with an early board that's aggressive, so that's why we run the killer over the X-Straight. The next flex spot goes to Rizo. He's a great card in control strategies because if you have 2 or more rested characters, which he counts as self, when you swing with him, you draw a card. Drawing cards is great because you want to see your pieces, you want to get your counter power in your hand to make sure that you can protect things like your Kazuki Odin or your Eustace Captain Kidd. The next flex spot is Set Warn Yamato. This card is great against aggressive decks that need to see their life to get more gas. She helps come in, make sure that they can't get that life, and chip it away faster. The next flex spot is Eustace Captain Kidd, the mid Kidd. He's been doing work since the Super pre-release. This card is an absolute threat and is super hard for green and purple decks to deal with. Purple has to use Wrath Kaido, green has to run Straw Sword or something dumb like that to get around it. So this card can beat, it can protect, it can do so much. The next flex spot goes to Big Kidd, the boogeyman of the OP1 format. He comes down, makes your hitbox 8 instead of 5. They have to attack him. It's a really hard card to deal with if you have enough blockers and just counter power in hand in general to help save him and just, slowly wither down your opponent. The last flex spot goes to Punk Gibson. It can be early removal, it can be late removal, it can be defensive with the 4K, you can rest things that cost 4 or less and really surprise your opponent early on. It's just wonderful in this deck to help synergize with Eustace Kidd and Kazuki Odin, your bigger cards. You keep them alive, you rest a blocker, and then all of a sudden you can go at their face or at their board. Kin'emon provides a new way to play and build green. This deck can be extremely explosive and have major tempo and board control. I'm super excited to play this new leader and the new meta. Do you have a leader that you'd like me to cover in this OP2 format? Then comment below and tell me which one you'd like me to cover next. Also, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and I will see y'all next time.